Right, hello everyone, welcome back. We are now into week 5 of the direct access of 1 Music Production Workshop. Okay, well, you guys are doing great, man. You guys are doing awesome. Can't believe it, we're already like almost near the end. Okay, so now this week itself, we are gonna dive into mixing. Okay, so we've already covered the recording aspect for the entire workshop. The first 4 weeks, right, we covered all the instruments, the drums, the bass, the guitars, the vocals. And now it's time to put it all together. Okay, so this is one of the most fun parts. Okay, right. So I love mixing. Okay, I think a lot of you also can also say the same thing, and a lot of guys and girls that I talk to who are audio engineers and everything, they always say, oh, I'd love to be a mixing engineer and all that. For me, it's because it's fun to put together all those different parts after you recorded everything, mix it together, assemble it together, and then to be able to see the finished product. You get to play around with all the stuff, you get to experiment with the EQs, compression, and putting all the effects together. Right? And there's just so much fun in doing that. But I think one of the most fun aspects with mixing is that, you can do it on your own. You can mix on your own time. You can, be alone in the studio. You don't have to have people all around you, right? Disturbing you. You can it's like your own private time. That's why a lot of people enjoy mixing. This form of mixing is actually a little bit more recent. Mixing used to be a process where before the days of having automation and before the days of DAWs, and we're talking about 60s and 70s, before mixing consoles. First of all, there were no computers, there were no digital audio workstations. Mixing had to be done on a console, either a large format console or some kind of an analog console. And if you wanted to, let's say, you want to make some automation moves, you needed to, in this section, you need to bump up the bass a little bit. You need to bump up this vocal up, down, anything. You can't do it one person. You need a whole team. So sometimes, right, this would involve, right, if the band is around, sometimes they will get the band members or they get the assistant or the engineer is there, then the producer will also be there. Okay, then everyone will have to do a little dance and choreography dance. It's like, okay, right, I'm going to move these faders up, let's bump it up. Okay, then when the chorus kicks in, another person have to move the faders up. Because everything had to be done manually, okay? So that was how complicated it was to do a mix in the past. Sometimes even, they had to mix in sections if you could not get, if it was impossible to have that sort of coordination, then sometimes it's a bit hard also. So sometimes if one person messes up the move, it's like, oh no, okay, then you have to start all over again. So sometimes to get around that, they even have to mix in sections. So how do they do that? All right, they mix, maybe the engineer will, mix and put the fader settings, everything for the verses first, mix it down, it gets printed down to the tape, and then move it to the chorus. He has to print it down, all right, to tape again. Everything, all this is real time. In the chorus, maybe it's different settings. He has to print that down, and then at the end, pray and hope, and he has to edit the two on tape. Edit the chorus and the verse and chorus together. And pray and hope that everything went smoothly. So that's how complicated it used to be, man. Okay. Now, obviously now everything is so much more easier, a lot easier. This little picture that you see here, okay, this is actually a Slate Digital. It's actually a Raven. So this is actually a Raven touchscreen controller. All right, so this is kind of the most advanced type of a controller that we have nowadays. This touchscreen is very proprietary. It actually really brings you back to how you actually record and mix and edit, because you can actually do editing as well on this. Anything you can do on the screen, you can do with a Raven. So basically, like, you can go up there, touch a knob, turn a knob, right? And best thing, of course, is multi-touch. One thing that you cannot do with a mouse and keyboard, you can't turn two things at the same time. With a touchscreen controller like that, and with a real analog console, you can. Because sometimes some kinds of processing, right, how it interacts, really needs to involve, you need to, let's say, what happens, let's say, if I bring up, let's say, the guitars and turn down the bass at the same time, or adjust some kind of compression at the same time. So with the mouse and the keyboard, you have to draw in the automation curve. You can't hear immediately how it reacts. You have to gut, you have to guess. So either you have to do an automation on the bass and turn it down first, then only you do the automation on guitar, then only you listen back and hear the results. So, to be honest, the honest truth, if you're mixing on a mouse and keyboard, it's actually slower, takes more time than if you're actually mixing on a console or with a control surface like that. So not everything about the computer and digital age makes things faster. It's actually slower to mix on a mouse and keyboard than an actual analog console, okay? But that's more of a question of workflow lah. Okay, so now let's dive straight in, okay? What is a great mix? So I'm not talking about okay mix, not talking about good mix, but what's a great mix? Here are a couple of points, okay, that I kind of want to share with you. Now, most of these points are actually taken from that book which I mentioned, right? Zen and the Art of Mixing. All right, but these are kind of the important points that I picked out, that's important to share lah. Let's talk about the definition of what a mix is lah. So a mix is a final two-track here meaning your left and right stereo. It's a final two-track presentation of a production, of a song production. You have your song production, you compile everything, and then you have to present it. You have to release it, you have to present it to your client, you have to present it to the public, right? So it's the final presentation of a production. So inside the production, it contains the performances. The performances meaning, the playing, whatever's been recorded, being played by the musicians or programmed out, being sung by the singer. Those are the performances. That's why in recording, we capture the performances. So the performances, right, of an arrangement. So a certain song, right, the performances, whatever parts the musicians play, whatever perform, is based on what kind of arrangement, we have for, in the end, the song. Okay, now the reason why I highlight these words are all highlighted, okay? Because these are actually all the elements you can think about it. What makes a great mix? Firstly, you need to have a great song. Then following that, you need to have a great arrangement. You need to have a good arrangement of the song. These are all important key elements to make a great mix. If you are missing out any of this, it's going to be hard. It's not impossible, but you're going to need to put in a lot of work and effort to try and result in a great mix lah. So it has to be a good song. It needs to have a good arrangement. You need to have a good performance, right? A good delivery and a good performance by the musicians and the singer or the band or the artist or whoever you are working with. So don't forget that. Again, another reason why a lot of younger engineers, especially when they just graduate, you ask them, they always say, I want to be a mixing engineer. I want to be a mix engineer. It's like, okay, hold on, relax, wait. The ingredients to having a great mix is all these things. So if you skip, all right, if you skip having a good song, if you skip having a great arrangement, and you skip having a good performance, you are not going to get a good mix lah. In the end, you're not going to get, you can get a good mix lah, you can get an okay mix, but it'll never be great, okay, quote unquote great. That's why I would say, and I would argue, and a lot of actually the top mixing engineers will actually tell you, the engineers will actually tell you that in the end, your mixing skills, whatever DAW you use, whatever plugins, whatever tricks or techniques, which I'm going to be talking about and showing you later, it's got very little influence and effect on the final outcome. Yes, of course, you can, if you have the experience and the skill and the knowledge, you can make it sound good. But really, the biggest influence on how the outcome of the mix is going to turn out, song arrangement, the choice of the parts. Right? So song arrangement is the arrangement, the choice of the parts, the choice of what sounds you use, and the performance, how great the performance is. So, the drummer, we had a very good, consistent drummer that helps to a great drum sound in the mix. It really boils down to the player and the performance. And of course, a good capture, a good recording of it as well. All those elements are important. So you cannot just skip one side and say that, there's the famous saying goes, fix it in the mix, okay? That is already becoming, like what I mentioned earlier, polishing the third, okay? The joke, of course, right, is that, okay, if you cannot fix it in the mix, the joke goes on, we fix it in the mastering. Okay, so that is another misconception, which again, next week we will cover. We'll talk about mastering. Now, if you want to expand and, extrapolate a little bit further into that little joke bit, okay, the joke now is that we call it, we fix it in the marketing. Okay, so now that's the joke, okay? The song could be terrible, the recording artist could be terrible. Well, never mind. Let's throw all the money, right? Let's throw as much money into the marketing and promotion. Then it will be awesome already. And sometimes, reality, sometimes it can be some truth to it. All jokes aside, right? Jokes aside, sometimes you throw enough money, you throw enough marketing and promo, right, into something, right? You can convince people that it's good, okay? Anyway, sidetrack. I digress. Okay, let's go back to the notes. So, what's a great mix? So, in a great mix is one that brings that production. Okay, so the production consists of the recording of the performances, the arrangement, and the song. You bring it to the fullest potential. That's actually a definition of a great mix. You take whatever you have, you take the performances, you take the recordings, whatever the arrangement that's been given you, if let's say you're not an arranger, or if you're working with a band, right? The band has worked out their song arrangement. Hopefully, during the pre-production process, which I said is important, you really work all of that out. So you take all of that, you mash it together, and you try to bring the maximum potential. That's what mixing is. You're trying to bring that production to the maximum potential that it has. So why would you say maximum potential? I would use that term and qualify it with maximum potential because, again, if the arrangement was not good in the first place, there's only so much you can do, right, to really turn it into a great mix. Sometimes it means having to mute some parts, remove certain sections. And as a mixing engineer, one of the most powerful things that you can do in the mix is to mute the part, okay? Sometimes if the part's not working, or it's not contributing, it's not helping with the mix, sometimes the best solution is just to mute it. We'll talk a little bit more later when we actually get into the practical side of things. Okay, moving on. Point number 3. Now, a great mix. Here's one thing about a great mix, okay? One thing is that it effectively manipulates the listener's emotions and focus. There's 2 things about a very, very great mix. It manipulates the emotions. It triggers some kind of emotional response in the listener, right? And it also, a great mix also draws the listener's focus. Okay, so here's, let me just move on to the next point first, okay? Let's talk about. So what is the kind of emotional response, right? And, and the kind of response and reaction that you want to get. It causes, if a great mix, it will cause the listener to want to sing along or dance, or some kind of physical reaction to it, physical and emotional reaction to the song. In the past, when I was even actually not so long ago, and I think a lot of people, laypersons, will always look at music this way, or since we're talking about mixes in this way, they will say that, okay, it's a good song or a bad song. When I was younger, I would look at it this way. Oh, this song is great, it's awesome, I love this song. Or my opposite reaction is, right, oh, this song sucks, I hate it. So it's usually these 2. And the thing is that, yes, you can sort of define song and music in this way. It's a valid point of view. You can say, you can say Bohemian Rhapsody is a great song, okay, it's the greatest song ever written, right, in history. Or you could point to, let's say, any K-pop song or mumble rap song, okay, and say that, oh, that song sucks, okay, it's repetitious, it's the most boring thing. You could say that. That's fair enough. Everyone has their own opinions, okay. But I found it a little bit more useful to look at songs and look at music in this way now. So now it's no longer about good or bad. I categorize it now as number 1, songs or mixes that generate a emotional and physical reaction. That's 1. Number 2, songs that don't. Songs that don't capture any reaction, that don't cause any reaction or or emotional or physical reaction at all, or any kind of response. Now, songs, right, you may think like some may be good or bad. There are some songs which are great. Yes, great songs, you automatically it's going to give you a, wow, it makes you feel good, makes you want to sing along, okay, it makes you want to dance. And there could be some songs which suck, which you totally hate. You find it so annoying that it's being played on the Hits FM or something, or some kind of top 40 or format radio. It's being played. You hate it so much. It's so annoying. But yeah, it's stuck in your head. It's an earworm. In the end, it still caused a reaction. It still caused you to react to it. In that sense, right? It's achieved its goal already. It already achieved its objective. It caused people to talk about it, right? Even though you hate it, even though you hate the song, but you talk about it, you tell people about it, right? You say, oh, I hate this song. But you are causing people to, you are talking about it. You are giving publicity. You're giving attention to it. They have achieved its goal already. Anyway, again, I digress, okay? But these are good things to sort of keep in mind, things to keep in mind whenever you are doing this whole recording, production, and mixing thing, okay? Right. Let's move on. Next page, okay? Here we go. Again, this is from the book, and the author, his name is Mixerman, okay? Right. That's actually his nickname or pseudonym. But he has this sort of a guide, right, which I find very useful. He calls it the 10 steps to better mixing. So if we're ready, let's go into step 1, okay? Now, number 1, mixing is an attitude. It's an attitude because when you step into the process of mixing, you need to have confidence. You need to have some sort of ego, a little bit of ego when you step into the process of mixing. When you start mixing, right, you need to get into a zone where, you go into a little bit of a mental gymnastics, and then you go in and say that, okay, today I'm going to nail it. I'm going to do a great mix. I'm going to go in with a very positive attitude and deliver and nail this mix. I'm going to do a great one. So it has to come with an attitude. If you go into mixing, a song, maybe, it was a project that you had trouble with, that you had a lot of stress going into it, right? But if you go and step into the mixing process with this kind of stress and background of something that you worry about in the back of your mind, it will affect the mix. It will affect your outcome. So it's very important. You need to go in very, very positively. You need to go in with a good degree, some degree of confidence. Of course, you don't be overconfident, right, in your ability. You need to have some positive, some confidence. You need to have a little bit of ego into it. You say, yes, okay, I'm going to be able to nail it. So that's why number 1, mixing is an attitude. Okay, now number 2, it's not really a step, but it's more of a point. If the song sucks, the mix is irrelevant. Okay, what does this point mean? Let's say if, let's try to put yourself in the shoes of a listener, an average listener. If they hate the song, if you hear a song that you don't like, that you hate it, you think it sucks, it doesn't matter how good the production is, how great the mixing is, right? The mix was, it could have been mixed by, it could be produced by Max Martin, written by Max Martin and his team and his production team, and it could be mixed by, some one of the top mixing engineers, mastered. But if you hate the song, you're going to think the song sucks anyway, right? So the mix is actually irrelevant in this case. Something very important to remember. Why is that so? One thing which some people always ask me, one general opinion if you ask a lot of producers and engineers. Now, if I am asked to produce a song, if I were to produce a song, for example, the song that we're working on, right, with the band. Now, if I don't like the song, if I don't believe in the song, right, if I don't love that song, to be honest, I can tell you, right, I would not want to produce it. So if I'm working with any bands or any artists, I feel that I need to really, really love and like the song. At least I need to like the song or be able to see the potential of how it should sound, that it can turn out great. Now, if I don't like the song, if I feel that it sucks, it's like no matter what, or whatever production tricks, I personally feel that I won't be able to do justice with it and to the song, and usually I'll turn down the project. I either turn it down or I tell the artist, hey, come back, either rewrite the song, come back with a better version of it until it really, triggers that response until it gets a response in me that, hey, yeah, okay, that's a good song. Okay, so again, that can be individual, right? So that's up to you. Now, related to this point, in mixing, if let's say somebody has sent the track to you and they just mix alone, here's the difference. With mixing, you don't have to like the song. Right? With mixing, you can detach your personal views and your personal preferences to the song, right? It can be anything. The song could be terrible, the lyrics could be cheesy, but that is not a factor when it comes to mixing. Okay? You could hate the song, okay? You don't like the melody, you don't like the lyrics. But in mixing, this is one thing where you can divorce, you can separate your personal feelings and emotions and opinions about the songwriting, because you are just purely looking at bringing the song to its fullest potential. That's all. That's your job. Okay. So there's these two differences lah. All right. Whenever I'm producing or whenever I'm mixing, kind of same goes when you're recording as well. If you're just recording somebody or recording a song or a vocal, you don't necessarily have to like the song, right? Okay. But it's your job and it's your responsibility to fulfill the job lah. So that's point 2. If the song sucks, mix is irrelevant. So number 3. Okay. So for example, all right, in after a typical mix session, okay, we will do a listening session. At least in the pre-COVID days, we will tend to do listening sessions. We'll always get the artists, we always get the band together into the room. We will sit down and we'll go and listen to the mix and whatever tweaks and whatever adjustments. One thing about mixing is working the room. Working the room here means managing and dealing with the people, right? Dealing with their expectations. Keeping them happy, keeping them relaxed. It's half of the battle won already, right? In the mixing. So it is a tip, it is kind of a psychological thing. When you get your clients, whoever you've mixed with, then you come in and do a listening. If you set the mood, keep them happy, get them relaxed, everything feels, you put the setting, your vibe of your room, of your studio. When they come in, they feel happy, they feel relaxed, they feel very, very at ease. That's half of the battle, because you're already putting them inside the right frame of mind to listen. If they've come into the project, with maybe they have some, hopefully not bad experience or negative experience with you. Maybe they have some negative experiences before that. Maybe, during the recording process, they had some negative experience. You don't want them to bring that kind of negative mindset mentality into the mixing stage. It's going to become to a point where they're going to find faults with everything. You're going to find problems with everything that you do in the mix. And trust me, that can be really happen. So if during the recording process, there were some things they're not happy with, when they come into it, they're also going to be like, they're going to second guess and doubt you, right, on everything that you do lah. It's like, really, they will come into with that mindset of, nak cari pasal, they're going to find faults, everything, this is wrong, this is going to be wrong, that's going to be a problem. Keeping them in that kind of a mental state is very important. It's half psychology. Okay, now number 4. Okay, right. And this is a very important point to remember. Putting everything proportional in a mix is going to make for pardon my French, is going to make for a shitty mix, okay? If everything is perfectly balanced, everything is nicely in proportion, it's going to make for a shitty mix. If everything is perfectly balanced and proportional, it already will sort of fail in one thing. And that is one of the original objectives of mixing. It fails in grabbing the listeners and directing the listeners' focus. In a mix, there always needs to be focus, man. There needs to be a focus in a mix. You cannot have everything audible, right? Whenever I get a response, right, and I say, I want to make everything audible, everything I must hear. That is already like, already going to be a warning sign for me that it's going to be a little bit problematic. Now, and that usually comes from musicians. If you are a musician, that's a very, very common kind of a comment lah, right? Everything must be audible. My hi-hat, drummer will say, everything, my hi-hat must be clear all the time. So if everything is clear and audible all the time and everything is proportionally balanced in the mix, there's no focus. Now, an average listener will need to focus. They will need to focus on a few things. And most human beings, right, when you survey them, the maximum that they can listen, that the brain can process at one time, is usually not more than 3. Not more than 3 elements. Maybe some, some more detailed people can maybe discern 4 lah. So, all right, the brain cannot process more than 3 elements at one time. So, in this case, let's talk about what those 3 elements are then. So, we talk about a mix, there will usually be maybe the rhythmic part. So, this is the drums, okay? The drums. Then, I would argue that the bass fulfills more of a rhythmic function. But again, it depends lah. Sometimes bass can be more of a harmonic, bass can be rhythmic. But let's classify that, because the drum and bass usually work together, rhythm section ma. You can also kind of include that with, let's say, rhythm instruments. Maybe the guitars are playing rhythm, so that is together in one rhythm. Then you maybe have one lead instrument or something like that. So that's your second element. Third element would be, obviously in a song, right, with vocals, would be the vocal, the lead vocal. So all the other additional parts are all just there to, the listener, right, has to purposely tune into those additional parts to hear all those, ear candy stuff. And it's great. You need to have it there, right? Otherwise, it's very, very empty. But, but subconsciously, the human brain only usually can process up to these 3 things. Now, as I said, musicians are usually a little bit more sensitive to that. That's why maybe they can focus on more stuff. But there lies in the problem. When they start focusing and listening to all the small stuff, they forget about the main thing that the listener, the fans listen to, main thing, vocal, the lead vocal, right? So later on, okay, in mixing, we'll talk about that a little bit more, elaborate a little bit more when I actually do the mix. So number 5, okay, we're halfway there. Gear used on a mix are tools that will make your life either easier or more difficult. It's these 2 things, okay? They either make your life easier, they make your work easier, or sometimes, it actually can also make your life more complicated. It's not what makes a mix good or bad. Okay, going back again earlier, as I mentioned, it's not the equipment, it's not the gear, it's not the tips or techniques. That has got very little effect and the outcome of what your mix sounds like, okay? Production, arrangement, choice of sounds, the performance has so much more influence on the mix, right, rather than the gear. So point number 6, this is very interesting. A mix can be great and not have a great sound. You're like thinking like, what? How can a great mix not have a great sound? But here's the thing, right? Again, it goes back to the earlier point about what is a great mix. A great mix is really about trying to get the reaction from the listener. Right? You can make everything technically perfect and everything perfect in the mix, but if it fails to grab the listener's attention, if there's no focus, if it doesn't cause the listener to want to sing along, hum the melody, or nod your head or bob your head or pump your fist in the air or something like that, it doesn't cause that reaction, right? Then it's not a great mix lah. Okay? So try to get this in your head as well. A great mix, right? Not necessarily needs to have a great sound. You can think of some really, really good examples. Let's take for example, early punk rock. I'm just take an example lah. Punk rock. Punk rock is all about, and not talking about the pop punk, not the commercial mainstream pop punk. Talking about real raw punk rock. It's all about the vibe and the energy and the excitement and the rawness. That's a great example of a great mix, right? But not having a great sound. Now, if you take all those punk rock songs, let's say Ramones lah or Strokes lah, and you make them sound technically perfect, wow, everything sounds clean, everything is like a clean mix, everything can be heard clearly, everything, vocal is nice up front with nice reverb and everything. And it makes it totally missed the point lah of what it's supposed to be, what that song is supposed to be about. Yes, there's times and place where you want to make everything really nice and perfect and clean. But there are times where you want to distort, when you want to add distortion, when you want to make things dirty, you want to make things raw, right? For appropriate for the production. So that's why, again, goes back to this point. Mix can be great, but not necessarily have a great sound. It can have a terrible, distorted sound. It's like super compressed, it's like, the balance is off. Maybe sometimes even the vocal also is not really up in front. But maybe it's appropriate. That's exactly how that song should sound like, you see. Let's move on. Number 7. This is very important. This relates back to psychology. It's more of a psychology of a mix as well. If a mix doesn't somehow and in some way annoy somebody in the room, right? Usually we talk about the musician, right? It's very likely the mix isn't done. Okay. And I'm telling you that is because you are not going to be able to make everyone happy, especially if you're dealing, let's say, with a group of people. There'll always be that one person or two persons that, in some way will find this thing annoying or find this annoying or that annoying. But that's just the nature, right? You cannot make everyone happy. You cannot please everyone involved. You have to have that confidence. You need to have to stick with the gun. Hopefully, if you are also the producer as well, you at least have, some kind of a veto say. If you're just a mixing engineer, you kind of have to follow instructions of what they want. Okay, let's move on. Okay, point 8. Here's one thing which some people find fault with this point. And also sometimes when I mention this, they find fault with it. They want to fight and they want to argue, right? And then it's like, okay, I have no time for that, right? I have no time to do any kind of a Twitter or Facebook war with you over this point. And this point is this: mixing cannot be taught. It can only be learned. Okay? I cannot, or anybody else, right, who is for that matter, I cannot teach you how to mix. It cannot be taught. You have to learn how to do it on your own. You have to learn to do it on yourself. And the reason for that is very, very, very simple. Simply because you and I, our hearing, and the other person, the person next to you, our hearing is not the same. Everyone's ears are not the same. Again, we go back earlier to the point where I said, our hearing is totally non-linear. Not only is it non-linear in terms of your frequency, in terms of your frequency response, and in terms of your amplitude, your level response, is totally non-linear. But in between us, different people also, and very surprisingly, different cultures also. That's very, very interesting. Okay, is very different. Chinese songs mixes have a sound of their own. Indonesian and Indonesian sound have a sound of their own. American mixes have a sound of their own. So it can be boiled down to cultural reasons as well. And so down to your language. Not saying that you cannot learn. Then the whole point of this course or this whole workshop is pointless. Then why do I attend this course? Because the instructor can't teach me. It's because basically you can't. We can't really teach you how to mix. You have to learn how to do it. You have to learn it on your own because your hearing and my hearing is totally different. We hear frequencies in totally different way. Okay, now, number 9, almost there. And this goes back to, point 6. Mix can be great, not have a great sound. It also goes back to the earlier objective of what a great mix is. So the overall vibe of the track is much more important than any individual part. Now, and again, this boils down again to working with musicians okay? Very often, right, they will say that, this song, right, the guitar is the main thing, and there's, yes, I will argue, yes, if the song, is very, very guitar driven, yes, it's important, it is important, but you always have to consider the overall vibe of the song. If you put so much focus on one part, let's say the guitars, but then your bass suffers, in the end. But then the vocal gets buried in the mix because maybe the guitarist is like the band leader in the band, so it's like, I like my guitar to be loud. If your focus is on the unimportant parts, the overall vibe of the song is not there. So overall vibe is much more important than any individual part. Okay, moving on. Number 10. This goes back to earlier on, just because a part was recorded, it doesn't mean it needs to be in the mix, okay? Doesn't mean that it was recorded, doesn't mean the track was given to you, it doesn't mean that it needs to end up in the mix lah. Again, sometimes because, during the process, recording process, the production process, they couldn't make up their minds. Like, oh, we're not sure. Let's just record it there, and then just send everything to the mixing engineer to sort out. And then you get like a million tracks. It's like, what are we supposed to do? Okay, then you need to figure out, okay, how to do that, how to sort through the mix. So just because the part was there does not necessarily mean you can always remove, you can always mute the parts. If it does not help, does not work, you can always mute it. Now, I did say now there's 10, okay, but actually, right, in the list which he recorded in that he wrote, actually there's 11. Be aggressive. Okay, this is not really a rule, right? It's more of an overall guide. You need to approach mixing again, as I said, as an attitude. You need to go in there with some kind of confidence. You need to go in like, you need to go in like you're going in for like some kind of a MMA match. You need to go and fight. You have to come in with kind of like a little bit of a warrior kind of a mentality, attitude. You cannot go in unsure, uncertain of yourself. Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You're going to need to go in with that confidence and go in, boom, okay, let's do this. Let's add this. Let's balance this in. Let's do this. Oh, let's EQ this. Let's do it. Go in with some degree of confidence and aggressiveness. And aggressive here also means you need to work fast. And a very, very good reason why you need to work fast is, again, ear fatigue. That's very important. If you take too long, especially in mixing, if you take too long to listen to a part, you take too long to work on compression, on EQing something, very, very soon, very, very fast, your ear will just get fatigued and get saturated. You listen to one part too long, over and over again. I'm sure you've experienced it. You listen to something over and over again, you get to a point where you get tired already. Like, whatever I do is like, it doesn't seem to make a difference anymore, You lose all sense of objectivity. So that can happen. That's something that's a danger that can happen if you work slow, right? So being aggressive is that, right? It means having confidence and it means working fast because you're trying to prevent, right? You're trying to prevent that ear fatigue from coming in, you see, right? You want everything to still sound fresh to you so that when you make your decisions, your EQ and compression decisions, okay, it sounds fresh. You're not listening to it for like 1 hour still working on the kick drum, okay? Right. Look, when I was younger, that's what happened to me, right? 1 hour, 45 minutes, still trying to EQ the kick drum, right? Nowadays, it's like, okay, 2 minutes, done. Okay, move on, forward, move on to the next thing. Okay, so those are the 10 steps, right? Well, 11 actually, right, to better mixing. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We good? Okay, now I'm going to sort of just briefly kind of recap about this point. If the song sucks, the mix is irrelevant. Now, so you see the subjective way of evaluating a song. Subjective here, meaning that, oh, I like it. Oh, it's nice. I love the song. Oh, I hate the song. It sucks. Oh, it's like, the song is okay lah. Boleh tahan lah. Okay. It has no bearing, right, on its quality, right? The quality of the mix. It's no bearing on it. So if you think it sucks, it's going to suck to you already, right? If you love it, you're going to love it. It's got no bearing on how good the mixing was or the recording is. Now, if someone hates a song, regardless of how popular the song may be, the mix has got no relevance to them lah. Okay? Now, so the goal of mixing, remember, going back to the goal of mixing remains the same. You are trying to bring the production, you are making the final presentation of that production. You're trying to bring it to its fullest potential. Now, whether the song is deemed great or not, whether people will like the song or hate the song in the future, it's really out of your hands. You can just remember that, okay? So don't go into mixing thinking that, people will hate this song or not. That's not what needs to be in the back of your mind. You need to just think of how you're going to bring that mix, right, to the fullest potential. Doesn't matter, right, whether people hate the song or not. That's not, it's out of your control. A bad mix, okay, can ruin the production, okay, of a great song. But very surprisingly, it's not necessarily you will ruin the song itself. And it has happened sometimes. The song could be very good, but the mix could be terrible. I'm sure you've heard some, some productions where you think that, it's not that great lah. The sound doesn't sound great, but somehow it's popular because maybe it resonates with listeners. Maybe the melody has resonated with the listener somehow, some way. The song, the lyrics, the melody, or sometimes maybe the promotion. Maybe the artist is so famous. There's so many other factors outside beyond that which can determine whether the song becomes a hit or not, okay? Not necessarily the mixing. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about one of the processes of mixing, okay? So one of the early things that when you step in and later on when we go in as well, okay, we will actually go through all this. I'm just kind of, going through the theoretical part of it. Right, discovery and framing. What's discovery? What's this discovery and framing all about? We'll talk about our ears and human ear response as non-linear. Mixing is also a non-linear response, non-linear process, okay? It doesn't mean that it's a process that you go with step one, like there's not like there's a formula, there's a cookbook to it, there's a recipe that you have to follow. Okay, step one, you do this. Step two, you do this. Step three, you do this. It's a non-linear process. You could start with drums. You could start with vocal. You can start with anything you want, okay? And then in the middle of the process, you can always jump back and forth one. And you'll see me doing it sometimes, right? I could be doing something vocal, poof, and then suddenly I would go and jump back to do something with the bass because I feel like, something strikes my mind immediately. Oh, okay, I will jump back to that. It's not a linear process. You could be in the middle of doing something and then suddenly you feel, I need to touch the hi-hat a bit. Then you go and jump back. So it's not a linear process. And very important, this is in bold. Everything affects everything. This is very, very important, especially when you are mixing and you're dealing with clients lah. Everything affects everything. You cannot say that you bump up. Let's say you adjust the hat by 1 dB and it doesn't affect the rest of the things. It can affect. It does affect the balance of other things. You cannot say that so you have to bear that in mind. Sometimes even the tiniest adjustments, right, of what you do can affect how the rest of the parts interact with each other. So discovery is actually this. It's a process of gathering the information about the track. So it's discovery lah. Okay, you are presented with you all these tracks in front of you. So you are discovering it. You look at the song over as a whole. You look at the parts. Okay, all these parts are here. Blah blah blah. Okay. Then you listen to the recording. How's the recording like? Was it a good recording, bad recording, okay recording? How's the performance? All right, okay. Not very tight lah. The drummer's not very tight or something like that. Or vocalist is a bit out of tune. You listen to all these kind of things. You discover, right, all this information. It's information gathering, right? And how all of these parts all work together. So we have discovery and now we have framing. Okay, so framing here, right, would be the broad strokes. Okay, that means you take a paintbrush, you take broad strokes of coloring. Right, it's the broad strokes process of building your mix. So this is usually where we talk about, doing a rough mix lah. Again, this is non-linear. Sometimes as you build your frame, as you do your build, you do a rough mix of stuff like that. You sometimes will discover things. You discover that, in this rough mix, okay, this part is not working with this. It's a bit clashing. Maybe this means I need to bring it down. I need to tone it down, or I need to mute it, or something like that, right? And vice versa, right? Sometimes it can be the other way around. So again, it's a non-linear thing. As you are doing stuff, as you are processing, as you're doing things, sometimes you discover, something else. So maybe you want to jump back and forth between these two parts, okay? One part of this discovery and framing, all right, is while you're doing it, okay, you want to identify if there are problems. You identify problems within the track. Identify it early on if possible, okay? And you determine the relative strengths and weaknesses of the production. So this is where, putting out a rough mix will tell you where the strengths, where the weaknesses are. So obviously you want to highlight what are the strengths. You want to try to hide wherever the weaknesses are, okay? So obviously if there's a part that's not really effective, or something like that, you don't want to put it loud, you don't want to balance it up front in the mix, okay? You want to hide it a little bit in the back so it's not so obvious. Now, the completion of the frame will help form the foundation of the mix, which in most cases is the drums and bass. Okay, this is very basic. Now, very important, bring in the parts. Bring in the parts here, meaning, bring in all the different tracks, bring it early, and bring in the vocal early. I always believe, okay, that, and not only I believe, this is my personal experience, right? I used to, the way I mix, right, and especially when you start off, it's like, oh, okay, as usual, most of the time we always start with drums first, okay, and then we do with kick, snare, hi-hat, the toms, overhead. Okay, then you move into your bass, then you move into your guitars, the rhythm instruments, then you fill in all your other additional instruments, okay. Once your music is done, okay, again, this is when I was younger. Okay, music, everything done only, then only I start to bring in the vocal. Problem is that once you've already made your music, everything sound perfect and great, then when you try to squeeze and fit your vocal in, it's sometimes a lot harder to do, right? Because now you've already mixed all your music, right, without the vocal as a frame of reference. Wow, music perfect already. It's like, Jun. Then when you want to try to make the vocal, right, work in the context of the mix, you want it to be nice and upfront, suddenly you encounter a situation where you have to apply very drastic EQ. Oh, because I need to cut through all the musical instruments, all the musical parts. I need to compress it like crazy because now I have to, to have it compete with the music. So I find it as a bit counterproductive. And again, when you have to apply all the extreme processing, you have to do so much EQ to it, you tend to usually, right, it makes the vocal sound unnatural. You really do very, very drastically change what the natural tone of it. My advice generally, and again, I'll show you later, right, is that you want to bring all your vocal parts in early. I would usually tend to mix the vocal early on, then only, all those other lead guitar parts, all those background parts, I usually won't touch it until later, right, at the later end of the stage. I'll usually go with the foundation first. Drums, bass, rhythmic instrument, if the rhythm instrument plays an important role. Then very, very early on, I need the vocal, to bring in the vocal early. I don't wait until the vocal is the last thing, very early on. So it helps to maintain the focus of the mix as well. When you have the vocal in very early, you will know that everything else that you bring in is going to support the vocal. It's not going to step on top of it. Let's move on. Now, reference other songs, okay, very important, right? Especially if you not have experience yet, you will always want to use some reference tracks. All right, so cool. That's the end of the introduction to mixing. So we covered, right, what's the definition of a great mix? What's the goal of mixing? What is your objective? Okay, and of course as well, I shared a little bit of the 10 steps. 10 steps that can help you get a better mix, and a little bit of an overview of the discovery and framing process. Okay, right. So after this, we're going to move on a little bit more into some of the tools and techniques and that you're going to be using, that we are going to be using and employing inside the mixer. Okay, all right. See you back in a minute.